Hi, welcome to The Upside. I'm your host, Paul Santinello. We're the show we talk about all the good things that are going on in life. And today we're going to talk a little bit of presidential politics with some familiar faces to The Upside. I have international political correspondent Tony Signoli. Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
And I have one of the biggest cheeses at the Republican, and your title is Assistant to No One?
Assistant Managing Editor.
Assistant Managing Editor, Rob Rizzuto. Thank you for coming, Rob.
Oh, anytime.
All I just know is that you're way up here and I'm, down whatever. So today's show is kind of timely because in about 3 weeks or so, the first votes for presidential politics are going to be cast. So we're going to talk a little bit about, well, a lot about that actually, I would say. And then we'll talk about whatever else is on our mind. So what I wanted, yesterday, Sarah Palin came out and endorsed Donald Trump. And if you thought the race was kind of going one way versus the other, that kind of was the game changer. And what I really feel bad for is, the other 18 candidates in the Republican cycle who no one even remembers anymore. So what are your thoughts about what's going on in Iowa? Because I thought the thing that I thought was going to be hard for Trump was to win Iowa, because it takes the groundwork more than just the name. Right,
Yeah.
The name. 15,000 people is one thing. Getting them to vote in Iowa,
Caucus,
is
and it's a caucus,
a different issue.
yeah.
It's not going to the polls and all that stuff. Your thoughts?
Well, I just reflecting back on the last time we had this conversation to where we are today. I mean, Trump back then, I think we all kind of thought this has got its expiration date on it.
Yep.
We weren't going to be talking about this come January. And here we are. Not only is he maintained, but he's leader of the pack. And then in Iowa, I didn't see him rising to the top there and kind of the way he has. You would start mentioning a little bit of this off air.
It's amazing. A lot of folks would have said if Donald Trump came in second in Iowa, that would have been a massive victory. We're talking about a caucus. It's not like just show up and go vote. You've got to actually know how to do this. You've got to know how to caucus. You've got to be a caucus goer, a member, yada, yada. And
Can you do me one favor?
Sure, yeah.
Explain the caucus, because the caucus isn't just going to the polls and clicking yes or no or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And it doesn't happen just the first time. You can have multiple votes. So
it's almost like the Democratic caucuses or the Republican caucuses that happen in Massachusetts, where you must be a Republican or you must be a Democrat, and you show up to the caucus on the given date, the given Saturday, and you go in and you've got a block of folks that are going to vote for you to be a delegate to the convention. It's almost like that. Not quite the same, but you said it actually a little better. You just don't walk in to vote, in a span of a 12-hour voting time. It's a specific time. You go in that evening. It requires you to organize folks, get them on a bus, get them in there, and these people have to be committed to Donald Trump or to Marco Rubio, and then stay the course in the course of that vote or multiple votes to make that happen. That's always the other piece of it, too. You get a lot of folks, first-timers, that'll show up to these things and think, I've come, I vote, I'm going home. You go home, you may have just defeated the purpose, because you've got to stay there to win. You've got to stay in the game and finish it off.
And that's the part I wanted to explain.
That's it. You've got to stay.
Right. This isn't simple, I voted for Donald Trump, we're done. This is a process.
It's a lot of commitment.
It's a lot of commitment, and a lot of people would say early on, or a month or 2 months ago, that Donald Trump's supporters weren't the kind of folks who were going to make that kind of commitment, weren't that sophisticated. That was the other thing, too. Not that they're just angry, they're just mad, they just want to be part of this movement and whatnot. But what's starting to hit me right now is I see Donald Trump, whether it be in Lowell, Massachusetts, or interview him out in Boston with some of the things we're doing, or New Hampshire, or South Carolina, or wherever else he's gone. If people are willing to line up and wait for him for 3.5, 4 hours to hear him speak, I'm thinking they might be willing to take the 30 minutes or the hour or whatever it's going to take to show up at Iowa caucus and pull that down. His New Hampshire numbers stun us. And I won't go long on this because we had talked about this one time before. I get the benefit of seeing the Franklin Pierce polls as they come out. And on occasion, being able to discuss it, before we go on air or do anything else with, of all people, Andy Card. So, the former chief of staff to President Bush, and who is openly saying, I'm with Bush, but I'm the president of Franklin Pierce, let's talk about these polls. And both of us are thinking the same thing. Early on, Donald Trump's unfavorability numbers, his dislike numbers, were so high that you would never, in the norm of relative sobriety as a political consultant, ever say, let's even run. When we're looking at 40 as an unfavorability, I'm saying, I don't think we can make this race. Or if I've got an incumbent who's at 40, it's all hands on deck, push all the panic buttons. This guy was in the 70s in August in New Hampshire. That's completely changed right now. Now that's dropped greatly, but the bigger pieces of those polls that stun us, and not just in New Hampshire, but a couple other places. We were asking the other questions. Okay, you don't like him. Are you voting for him? Yes. Or who are you voting for in general? I'm voting for Donald Trump. Why? Just because. Because I'm mad as heck and I'm angry. And there is an aspect that he has tapped into of a unique anger. This isn't just the off-the-wall wingnuts that are angry. This isn't the Tea Partiers and the rest and whatnot. There's average, regular folks out there. And my last thing, forgive me for going so long, maybe I'm putting too much science in this. What I'm shocked at is the numbers of independent and unenrolled who, when they break, amongst all the choices that they've got, they're breaking Trump or they're breaking Bernie Sanders, which is another whole piece of us.
Yep.
To piece for us.
Oh, we'll hit that soon.
We'll hit that later.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that's where that base, that's where it's cutting up and going. It's those two. Holy smokes.
But
This is stunning.
does Iowa really, one of the things I always say, it's Iowa, right? It's caucus, it's real, whatever. Does it really matter? And if you're the front runner, it does and it doesn't. But if you're Donald Trump where you weren't supposed to finish, I guess it does matter. But what do you think? Does Iowa matter in the big scheme of things?
I think it does.
Yeah.
But, if nothing else, in a symbolic sense, it does send a message, especially in this case where, like you said, if he came in second, it was considered a success.
Right.
But just the fact that he's blown away all expectations, yeah. If he takes Iowa, I think people are taking notice, and then it goes from, well, this guy's not really going to win. He's putting on a good show to.
Right.
He's the next president in some people's minds, and I think as powerful as perception is in politics, I think it absolutely means something.
I agree with you. It means something if it is Donald Trump. It really, really does. Because it should be Ted Cruz. It should be, as we've seen in the past, a Santorum, a Huckabee, something like
Right.
that. Iowa does that. But because it's Trump, and because you can throw out the entire playbook on presidential campaigns because of Trump right now, if it's Trump, that changes things. Even if he's a second. The other part, he's one of the greatest marketers we've ever seen. Forget the politics and where he stands on issues.
Yeah.
Nobody's a better marketer than Donald Trump. He'll take that victory and spin it 52 ways to Sunday, grab New Hampshire, and roar on from there.
Yep.
Holy smokes.
So let me ask you the other question, New Hampshire. Bernie and Hillary. What's happened to her to where Bernie Sanders is, even challenging her in Iowa?
Well, Bernie's really, we were talking about
Yeah.
this a little bit off
Yeah.
air. He went from being, he's the senator next
Yeah.
door to
Right.
Hillary's not resonating.
Yeah.
And now Bernie Sanders is not just capitalizing off that, but he is capitalizing off it. He's making the most of it every single day. And the differences seem to be getting more stark between the two. Bernie's just, where Hillary has been wishy-washy and kind of, a little subdued, Bernie's out there and he's raising hell. And people see that, and I think it's striking them.
I think it's, yeah. You look at the base, too, and very blunt about it at this point, as is Bernie Sanders this last 2 or 3 weeks. Communist. Yes, I was a member of the Communist Party. Yes, I am a socialist. And you've got folks now in polls who are saying, oh, well, that's what an American communist is, or an American. So, oh, well, he's for me who's out here doing 2 jobs, doing this. He's cutting into a thing that's normally the turf of some Republicans. He's electrified, though, a base, a progressive liberal base, in the Democratic Party that didn't really warm to Hillary in 2008. He's grabbed the Barack Obama crowd, but he's grabbed all these other folks too. This is unique. I mean, another anomaly. We concentrate so much on the anomaly or the phenomenon of Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders is too right now. And then there's the money, and there's the people that are sending that money in. We always say follow the money. In the last quarter, Bernie Sanders raised almost as much as Hillary Clinton. But he did it with the $5, $10, $15 contributions. He did it with folks saying, I don't have a lot, but I'll commit $10, $15, or $25 for the next 10 months. And I'll send it in, religiously on the same day every month. They're doing that. 34 million. She raised 37. And if you look at where hers came from, it's the big donors and whatnot. Something's happened. And is it as simple as Hillary or her folks just misreading the tea leaves? Or is this not the message that America is looking for right now? You look at her resume to be president of the United States on paper, that's it. She is the most qualified person on paper to be president. But we always come back to something that Joe Napolitan used to say. They got to like you to vote for you, or they got to be as mad as hell and thinking that you're going to be the one that's going to get them what they want. Yeah.
There was one clip that I saw from their debate, I mean, and again, they're having a debate during an NFL playoff game. God bless them. But there was one clip I did see where she attacked Bernie Sanders for his stance on the NRA. Now, here's a senator from Vermont, right? A lot of rural areas, a lot of hunting areas. And then he went after her for her campaign contributions from the Wall Street banks. And what I found interesting is that when you're looking at the issues of what she's attacking Bernie Sanders on, and it sounded, not because I don't like Hillary Clinton, but it sounded really petty, because I would think that most people in that primary vote are going to look at the big banks as the enemy versus the guys who are or people who are hunting. Gun control, I know, is a big issue amongst liberals in general, but I can't imagine it's as big of an issue. So to me, it was like she's attacking him on this thing that, wait a minute, he's a senator from Vermont, and he talked about how he changes his stance and all this stuff, but he's hitting her where the heart of the matter is, because she's railed against big banks. She's railed against Wall Street, and here he is in a Democrat primary nailing her for these hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she's hitting him on his stance to support of the NRA. And I would think one has more penetration into that base than the other, one topic than the other. And I would think if you had to say, and especially the Berniacs or whatever, right? That's Wall Street is the enemy. Liz Warren, Wall Street's the enemy. The NRA, yes, but Wall Street more. And I think that, she picked the wrong issue to go at him on versus what she had to be to defend, and I just thought it was a really different contrast of whoever brought that up on her campaign, and I'm sure it's not her, but whoever brought that up on the campaign, that probably wasn't the right issue to go after him on, because he has changed his stance and now wouldn't support the same things he supported before. She can't quite say that with big Wall Street banks because she just took that money from them. So it's a little bit, I don't know who is managing her campaign, but it just saw they got caught with their pants down going after an attack on Bernie Sanders that just didn't, to me, it didn't resonate, because the guy can defend his votes representing a very rural state compared to most, versus defending your record against taking donations from Wall Street banks and then saying you're going to regulate them.
Some of the more liberal-leaning folks I talked with that have actually said that, like they almost give Bernie the pass on the gun. Well, he's in Vermont.
Right.
Right.
He voted his constituency.
Exactly. He was representing his people. But when it comes to Hillary and the banks and Wall Street money, on the Democratic side, she's kind of their candidate, and they see that, and they didn't seem to be as forgiving.
In the base of the Democratic Party, the liberal progressive base, you got it. If you're going to preach it, you better be it. That's all. I remember having that drilled into my head in a campaign down south once. If you're going to preach it, you better be it. And Bernie is what Bernie is. He's the same guy since the first day he walked into the Burlington, Vermont, mayor's office. There's no change. It's the same guy. And on guns, he gave a pretty qualified answer. And he didn't just take the easy route and say, hey, I'm from Vermont. He didn't take the pass. He said, that bill, as we all know, legislation is never black and white. There was a lot of gray in there. And this is how I voted. So he qualifies it. Sometimes, too, you got to look to history. And in 2004, John Kerry won Iowa by going out duck hunting. And also by tying into the 29 chapters of the Sons of Italy, which is another whole story, which was amazing for John Kerry, given his background and whatnot. But he played guns a different way, and that helped him to win Iowa. She's taken it in a different tack to try to bring some folks back to her. Hasn't happened, but it's the Wall Street thing. And then there's the specter, that shadow that looms large from Massachusetts over New Hampshire. And not just New Hampshire, but now everywhere. Incredibly fantastic article by Shannon Young, your political reporter at The Republican. I've had other political consultants from afar, Chicago, D.C., Florida, mention it. It made the rounds, and not just because I put it out, or maybe because probably an Eric Lesser reads it here and sends it to his guys and whatnot in Washington. It resonated because the shadow is Elizabeth Warren. She can be a kingmaker or a queenmaker, and she's gone with neither yet. And gosh golly gee whiz, it's the Wall Street thing. Here's a lady who gets elected, gets the help of the President of the United States to get elected, shows up in Washington and pounds the President within 4 weeks or 4 months, depending on how you look at it, about, hey, we were going to fight Wall Street together. Come on. That's there. And it's one of the things that moves independent voters too. Everybody's angry. The electorate's not that dumb. They remember what happened in 2008. They remember all the Goldman Sachs, all the rest and whatnot. That's on their mind still too. And they're saying, Bernie's pure. She's not. And it's as simple as taking the dollars from the Wall Street players to do speeches and all. But, you know, as much as we focus on that, and a lot of Republicans would like to say, wait till we get her on the ropes and we hit her on Benghazi, and let's go after her on this, and let's go beat up Bill again and whatnot. Wait till the China stuff comes out. Between Bill as president, the Clinton Foundation, and her time as secretary, that closeness, that coziness with China. World events impact presidential races. And now, what's impacting everybody's economy? China. That piece is going to be unique. And can it be as simple as a purist like a Bernie Sanders who can say, I never dipped into those wells? Or a guy like Donald Trump saying, I don't need to, and on top of that, who do you want on the other side of the table from those guys in China? Me or her? Or Bernie? Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to talk about is the Republican establishment, the party leaders, so to speak, in their regards to Donald Trump. One of the things that impresses me more and more with Donald Trump, and I listen, I like the guy. There's probably about 5 or 6 Republicans I would vote for, but I'll share my reasons why I would support Donald Trump for president. But when you look at it, Donald Trump is driving the Republican elite crazy. Okay, and whether they're bringing up the things of him being conservative, not being conservative. And yet, some of the ones they're champion don't fit the bill either, so to speak. But Donald Trump is driving them crazy. And the biggest factor that I see is that because they can't control him. He's not beholden to whoever's up at the top of the GOP leadership, passing the baton to him and saying, you're our guy. What do you think? What's the reason why he's driving Republicans crazy?
Well, from what I'm seeing,
I know he's driving Democrats crazy, but why is he driving Republicans crazy?
I think it's you hit the nail on the head with him not being the establishment candidate. You can't control him. He's going to say whatever the hell he wants to say.
Yeah.
And he's not really too concerned about the ramifications of it. If there's an uproar, he'll deal with it. But you can't control the guy's message, and you certainly can't control the guy. And from any establishment point of view, I think that's dangerous, whether it's Democrat or Republican. From what I've seen, they don't want that.
Yeah.
They want the candidate that's going to say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. All right, they're going to take their orders, and they're going to go be, a good foot soldier, and if they're at the top of the chain.
I think that's on target. When you talk about the establishment of the Republican Party, there's certainly some really good people, who are there for the right reasons, who believe what they believe. The same on the Democratic side. They can get into, their philosophy and their ethics and whatnot. But then you've got the rest of what the establishment is. And let's be frank about that. On the Democratic side or on the Republican side, it's the same thing. It's about the money. K Street runs that show. It's Wall Street. And I don't mean to blame Wall Street, because I think they take a bigger rap in that regard. It's K Street. It's all the lobbyists, and not just those in the financial industry. It's who's in that seat that can impact what effort, what contract, which global issue, conflict, whatever that's going to benefit or help, this company, that corporation, or this organization. There's all that goes on behind the scenes. And as we sit here today, it's a good piece that you bring up, this establishment thing, because we haven't seen the big establishment players weigh in. Where are the Kochs right now? Where are, my goodness, Sheldon Adelson, $100 million is what he's talking about. I mean, that's obscene. It should be illegal, but it is what it is, given the Supreme Court decision and whatnot. But they haven't weighed in yet. And that's the establishment tip of the iceberg that you see. It's not all the rest of the pack and all the rest that shakes and whatnot. Trump is terrifying to them in that regard. And that's something he can use, something he has used, and it seems to be firing up some of his base. It plays into that simple argument that if you don't like the way things are, don't subscribe to that old thought about, leaving things the same way. We all know the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. It's simplistic, but he's playing into that. The big money hasn't weighed in yet, and we hear so often, especially on the Republican side, more so, and there's some Democrat on this too. Well, the establishment players, the silver hairs, the players are going to step in at some point. They want to fix this situation, right? Well, we heard that before too. That's how they were going to take care of Barack Obama, and they did. The Karl Roves and the rest didn't.
Yeah.
So the establishment, the guys, Ben Ginsberg, perhaps one of the best players in the Republican hierarchy and whatnot in that regard, actually saying, forget anything you've ever thought before, and if you're thinking that the wise owls, the silver hairs on the Republican side and the Democratic side are going to sit down and say, oh my God, Hillary can't win. Oh my God, Bernie's a communist. We better see if we can dust off Biden. Hey, and what's the other one? And I'll say it before you even hear it later on. Bloomberg, Bloomberg, Bloomberg. Watch, you'll start to hear his name all of a sudden in the next 12 hours of this media cycle that we're in right now. All that, it's not really there. And do they all get together and sit down and figure out? No, they're too busy making money doing other things right now. And this is heavy lifting. This is hard work.
Yep.
So Donald's running the table, as we like to say, and on his side in that regard right now. Yeah.
And it's funny because like I said, I'm on the Republican side. I've had to put up with the insults of someone who could be anybody who's intelligent. Why would you ever support Donald Trump? And what I see in my business, I do retirement income planning for people. Okay, people who are getting ready to retire come and see me and say, "Can I get there?" And I got to tell you is that there's more fear in people's eyes today than I've ever seen in 30 plus years of doing this. They're worried. They've got vastly more sums of money than their parents did at retirement, but they're worried that they're going to be able to live the lifestyle they want, that they're perceived to have worked for 30 years to build, right? And is it going to be enough? And when you see your dollar shrinking, inflation, we're in a low inflationary period. Go to Big Y and buy your loaf of bread. Go to Big Y, buy your dozen eggs. We're not in a low inflationary period, right? So people are really worried. And I think what comes to me with Donald Trump is, and what I really have a problem with my establishment friends is that we've been promoted to be, if you're a conservative like I am, you can't have, you're opposed to their big tent mentality, right? You need to be in favor of gay marriage and, don't worry about pro-choice, pro-life. Those things just get in the way of really what we want to do for the country. Here comes Donald Trump and opens up the tent, blows the doors off of it, brings in every kind of walk of life that you can imagine into the Republican primary issues, and they don't like him. But he's bringing in maybe not exactly the kind of people they were looking for, but he's bringing in people. And what seems to me what I'm looking at is, here's a guy who's resonating with, my 78-year-old mother, who is a legal immigrant into this country, who sees a guy who says, I'm tired. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing us getting this secondhand. You see people who, I see clients who you normally wouldn't say, who are probably more liberal than conservative and, more left than right, saying, you know what, I can't take it anymore. I'm just, they see politics, like you said, as the money. They don't say K Street, but that's what they're referring to, right? So here's a guy that says, I'm not even asking you for money for my campaign, but he's getting it, right? Donald Trump's getting it. But the bottom line is a guy who's finally, in this world of political correctness, who seems to have stepped up and said, we're done. We're tired of it. Why take a back seat? And if you think about it, is that my kids and my grandkids aren't going to see the same America I grew up in. And I don't mean racially or nothing like that, because we grew up in a diversified world, being children of immigrants,
sure.
Or grandchildren of immigrants. You didn't grow up in in the high end of the status anyway. So I'm talking about economically, being able to afford that house, getting out of college debt. And that's where I think Bernie Sanders is hitting them with the college. These kids are aggravated, right? They get out of college, and I just see it. And my point is that this guy is coming in and blowing the doors off of everything, but saying he's bringing in people that normally wouldn't go into a Republican primary. And like you said, there's nobody lining up for it. God bless Ted Cruz. The only thing Donald Trump is doing is making Ted Cruz look good to the establishment, right? Because now Cruz isn't a bad choice because he can fight Donald Trump. But you don't get thousands of people for Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio, who's a great speaker on the circuit and everything, and all the other candidates are drawing hundreds of people. There's something going on, like you said, where someone's waiting 4 hours to get into an event that you're going to be sitting way up in the rafters for anyway. That is Barack Obama 8 years ago.
Wow.
And I think Bernie Sanders is on the other end of the scale, right? He's on the opposite end, but he's doing the same thing. He's blown the doors off of the conventional Democrat politics, right? Here's the coronation of Hillary Clinton, and here comes Bernie Sanders, whose message is resonating with people. And it's not, everybody's feigning this. You can all feign, I'm angry at the, terrorists or whatever. Here's a guy coming in on Donald Trump on one end saying, we're going to kick their ass. And you got Bernie Sanders on the other end saying you shouldn't have college debt. Now, there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, but they're both resonating with probably about 80% of the population. So even if you're a conservative and you see your kids coming out of college with 120 grand in debt, you're saying, wait a minute, this guy's maybe I don't agree with him on 90% of his stuff, but he's saying something. And again, that's where the thing of the clip I saw, Hillary Clinton's talking about the NRA. Bernie Sanders is talking about college debt. There's a huge difference there. You're talking you're coming right
Which
here.
one's in your house?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Who's dealing with it? There's that piece of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're hitting hard issues. And it seems like Hillary and the rest of the Republicans are trying to, do the cerebral thing of, we need this, and the same old rhetoric, like you said. And
The stuff that's always worked.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to repeat something. I said it to both of you guys, but it struck me in such a way. People say, well, why is Donald Trump doing so well? What you said you're running into in your business. And I had seen this circulated, and I forget who put it out there, but it was like one of the fundraising emails that comes to the inbox. And I believe it was from a liberal group. It was a Democratic group. And it said, Donald Trump has tapped into the vein of the dwindling working class that not only worries that their kids won't do better than them, but worries that they won't even do as well as them.
Right.
And that's where people are. I'm from Western New York, originally, about 500 miles, west.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's basically the Midwest. We're
Yeah,
south of
absolutely.
Buffalo, especially by comparison.
Yeah.
It's a conservative country, but a lot of the people I know back there, folks that voted for Barack Obama, twice, they're talking about Donald Trump. And I go back, and it's like, I always try to do more listening than talking, you know what I mean? Try to really get a feel for things. And when I ask, what is it about him that appeals? It is just that. People they're financially concerned. And it's not just the business leaders saying that we have fiscal uncertainty and it's leading us not to hire, not to expand. It's mom and dad, and they're freaking out because if they're sitting on a little nest egg, a little pile of cash that they were lucky enough to accumulate, they're afraid, they're scared to death about what's
And it's
gonna
not the
happen.
greed factor. It's not.
No.
It's not this like I want to make you richer kind of thing. Donald Trump's not coming in and saying we should cut taxes. Donald Trump is saying we should tax the wealthy a little bit more. His words were, and he was on a show saying, me and my friends could afford to pay a little bit more. That's not a Republican thing. No, I mean that's you. So you talk about that's a liberal Democrat,
yeah.
right? Typically.
And it's something that resonates with those folks.
So the people you're talking to aren't talking about the greed for themselves.
No.
They're talking about just being able to not just survive, but how do you live the life that you worked 40 years for?
Yeah.
And like you said, they're looking at their kids, and the kids are looking at them saying, "Holy smokes, this just isn't. Your home's supposed to be worth more in value.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to make a third of a percent on your savings account when you need that money for retirement type of thing." And that in the stock market, this also changes everything that's happened in this first few weeks of the year.
Absolutely, yeah.
It isn't as rosy
Fear.
as what it is. So I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, your 401k plan just is down 10, 15%.
Yeah.
So now you're really worrying about it. But I think you're right. It's not just mom and dad looking at the kids. It's the kids looking at mom and dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fear, and that's always the other piece of it too, and not that trite line that we use too often sometimes in covering politics about the politics of fear, but real fear that's out there, and it can motivate greatly. Always remember Ronald Reagan. There's a bear in the woods. That whole piece, that amazing television commercial of his that was so similar to what Joe Napolitan had done for Lyndon Johnson with that one daisy commercial.
Yeah.
The little girl picking the petals off the daisy, and you go into her eyes, she's doing the petals and whatnot, and all of a sudden you see that atomic bomb and all. Fear. Fear of Goldwater in '64, Reagan, fear of the Soviet Union in '80, and of course timing too. We had the Iran hostages at that point. Everything is relevant, but there is a fear, and I think Paul just hit it, and you said it absolutely perfectly about what the people in Western New York are feeling. There's that fear factor about, holy smokes, my kids aren't going to be able to do what I've done, and am I going to be okay for retirement? How am I paying for a longer life right now? And there is that frustration piece that's out there, and I see it in every poll. As we tear into polls that aren't just the horse race questions of the names, the quality of life issues that are out there, I'm seeing it even in Hamilton County right now. There is a fear as we look at the county and whatnot, overall of, holy smokes, things aren't really getting better, and we're kind of behind. One little economic blip, and I'm in trouble. And then we see one other thing, and not to go along in this, and it's not just in polling, it's financial statistics. You're going to get it out of the Journal, you're going to get it out of the Kippel Journal, you're going to get it from people like you that are watching this every day, Paul, for your clients and whatnot. There's that other piece of there are more people in the middle class, even the upper middle class, who are a paycheck away from some kind of like, holy smokes, I can't pay the mortgage this month.
Disaster.
And these are hardworking folks working a job, both employed, both spouses, and these folks are in places that are surprising to you and whatnot right now. That fear factor is really becoming big, and we don't look to the Congress to help us on this. You look to the person who's sitting behind the big desk, who's got the big phone and who's making the larger than life decisions that have to be made here. And stunningly, along comes this guy who's this unbelievable P.T. Barnum, and out of the blue. We've also been watching his evolution. He's actually gotten better on the stump in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Ted Cruz should have knocked him out in that last debate, and he went right at him. And Ted Cruz went at code. He went for the code. New Yorker. He's a guy from New York. Yeah, you know how they are in New York, right? And it was amazing. The old Donald Trump, let's go, shock it up, let's come on right now, right? Instead, took a moment. We were all from New York on 9/11, and he went right into that piece. Score, almost a knockout. Yep. But the more amazing thing, how crazy is this cycle? The very next morning, the liberal, progressive governor of New York, as being as careful as he could, Andrew Cuomo, son of Mario Cuomo, comes out and defends Donald Trump by defending New York, and by osmosis helps Donald Trump. Yep. And as we're sitting here and people will be watching this a few days from today, what else has happened in the last 24 hours? Not only has Sarah Palin come out, God almighty, talk about this carnival sideshow at this point. Some people look at it that way. But on the other side, she was able to grab the cycle for a while for Trump, putting more of a focus on it. And more amazingly, the governor, the longest serving governor of Iowa, comes out and says, I'm not endorsing anybody, but don't vote for Ted Cruz. What did he just do for Donald Trump? I ain't doing this, but don't vote. So this stuff is amazing. And this guy's establishment. Yeah. The Governor Branstad is establishment. He's Republican royalty and whatnot. And by saying that, what did he just do to Cruz? This is the most amazing cycle. And not just for junkies like us, but for the average person out there, it all comes back to what you guys have just brought up. How it hits their pocketbook, how it affects their kids. This is the big one. Yeah.
You know what I found too is I was listening in one of the Republican debates, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, I just issued my 15-page report on, we're going to fight terrorism, my 15-page report on the budget. And Donald Trump is there saying, I'm going to make America great again. I'm going to go to China. I'm going to negotiate good deals. Say what you want to say about the guy. He's a professional businessman who's been very successful. Yeah, certain companies went bankrupt, but there was a purpose. If you understand how that really works, that's a strategy, not he wasn't poor kind of thing. But he's internationally developed properties internationally, and I'm not giving him a commercial because he does it better than I could. But here's a guy that's going in there and saying, I'm going to take back and make sure that we're getting what we're supposed to get, and not get the shaft from China, not let in Italy, this massive flood of refugees that we know that are. Some of them are bad or whatever, and then one of the things was the comment about stopping the Muslims. Well, it was done by Jimmy Carter or something, right, 30 years earlier. And I think what changed the campaign is this: there's the traditional campaign, because you guys can put an article up and it goes out over the world, right? You don't have to wait till the next morning to read it, so people can go back and research that Jimmy Carter put a ban on whatever it was at the time, and so to what I want to say, support Donald Trump's stance, right? So the other thing. What I was going to say is that they're issuing these reports, and he's saying, "Here's what I'm going to do." And there was some study I saw that said that of any presidential candidate, everybody who's come out with a tax plan, it was never implemented. And I don't know where I found that or heard that, but your tax plan for here's my 15-page tax plan. It's never been implemented. It's been Congress that drives the tax code and all that stuff. And I found it interesting that they're sticking to that traditional, here's my plan, and Donald Trump just says, I'm going to do this. And again, whether he's a carnival, PT, some people believe he's going to do it. He's done it. And the biggest thing I see with him is that the media created the guy. Yeah. They can't take him down. They made him. He's their child. He's the Frankenstein of the media. They made him. You guys put him in there when he had The Apprentice, whatever. I'm just, the media did it, right? He was the darling of the world on The Apprentice, and you're fired kind of stuff. It created that persona. Well, he is his persona, I think, but I'm just saying they built them. They just can't deconstruct them now. They can't stop Frankenstein.
I've been in TV and radio studios when he's called in or come in, and I've seen something happen that stuns me. In the beginning, it was, how can I score as a reporter? How can I score as an editor? I hit Donald Trump, I score, I'm making a name for myself. That was a little bit of the game in the very beginning, and it stopped quickly because it was found that this guy's Teflon, this is Superman, I can't get through here. But then something else changed. In every one of these newsrooms that I've been in, or studios when he's come in and whatnot, you'll see an editor or a producer start to do this. And we know what that means. Keep him going, keep him talking. You're not giving him his 5 or his 10. You want to keep it going, because whether you view Donald Trump like a train wreck or as the next savior of the United States of America, People are interested. And when they're doing this, that means ask them another question. Keep it going. Keep them on. See how long you can keep them on. That's the prize. Because as you do that, the numbers are climbing.
Yep.
And now in this net age where so much of it is on the net, whether it be television, whether it be radio, we can actually watch those numbers. We're not waiting for the Nielsen's and the Arbitrons to come in next quarter. What we're all seeing, this guy means cha-ching if he's on the cover of your newspaper. He means cha-ching if you just had him for 10 minutes on your internet radio show that perhaps covers New Hampshire to Boston to Worcester,
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
No,
it's a
true.
phenomenon.
He sells. I can
Yeah,
tell you,
he sells. That's it. Yeah.
We go to, we go to a Donald Trump event, the one in Worcester, the one in Lowell.
Yeah.
We covered both those thoroughly. The numbers are there.
Yeah.
We can see them instantly. And, it was funny. We were having a debate on whether to do live coverage of the different rallies. And historically, there's not a lot of interest necessarily for that as it's going on.
Yeah.
This guy broke the traditional thought. And we did live coverage of both rallies, and it was unbelievable how people were just clamoring to keep refreshing their page because they want to see what's he saying now? What's the next statement? What's happening in there now?
Wow. Okay.
That level of interest, especially, 7 o'clock on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
There you go. Yeah.
That's it's crazy.
Yeah.
When there's other stuff to watch, other stuff
Yeah.
to tune into, and I
There's
love
other
what you just
things
said.
happening.
Refreshing the page,
Yeah.
page. That's what people are looking for. It's just
Yeah.
stunning. It pulls to the door. And I'll even go further back. The first Republican debate, 28 million people on an August night when there's 9 great baseball games on at the same time, and you're watching this. Why were you watching? It was
Yeah.
the Trump factor.
Yeah. I'm finding too that his crowds tend to be not as old as you might find in a traditional Republican
There's
rally.
the shocker. There's the
Yeah.
shocker. We're looking at numbers, and that's what's surprising. You said something before, or one of you had, about how it was Barack Obama who had these huge, you did, in 08,
Yep.
it was Barack Obama drawing in the crowds. Well, this guy's not only drawing in the crowds, he's bringing in a demographic base that's across the base. It's 18 to 80. You're seeing folks in suit and ties. I love your coverage because what we've been seeing by you covering those events in Worcester and Lowell is that mix of people. You're seeing the guy in the suit coat who looks like the conservative Republican, and then you're seeing, the hippie from 1960. And I'm saying, how are these people in the same room for Donald Trump?
Yeah.
But youth, young, watching where they're going, Bernie, 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 Trump, Trump. What's happening? It's wild.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And we can track that now even more so. Data mining is the cool word and all that.
Yeah.
But you can track it so much more easily because of the net. And this is where they're playing. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
One of my early interviews with him, doing it on radio out of Boston, New Hampshire, where again, I'm trying to score. I'm not trying to do any puff pieces, and I'm not mesmerized by this is Donald Trump. And I just said to him, Mr. Trump, New York, helicopters, Miami where when you're in Iowa, and he started to laugh one night. And I goes, you have nothing in common at all with the actual regular voter in New Hampshire. I mean, you're a billionaire. And we started to get into this thing and whatnot. And then he slowly, calmly got into, I've got everything in common with him. Because we're talking about the exact same basic fundamental thing. It's about what Rob said earlier. It's about, is your kid going to be better off down the road? Is it going to be, who's going to be at that table taking on Putin, etc. And I was amazed because we were ready. That was supposed to be the opening for the real reporters, not me, to jump in and go. And they just sat there by the time it was done. I said, okay, that was the cue. Let's go, right?
Yeah.
And we're just like, well, okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next. Let's talk about your relationship with Tom Brady. Next thing I know, we're talking Patriots football. He scored. He won.
Yeah.
Why?
There's a couple things. Like personally, when someone makes so many people that uncomfortable, to me it means there's something going on.
Yeah.
He's hitting something because he's making a lot. I mean, and I look at when I read a New York Times article about Sarah Palin's endorsement, and they were really nasty about
Sure.
her, that she was a huckster and all this other stuff. And the reality, though, is there isn't a Republican candidate in the field that wouldn't have wanted her endorsement.
Right.
Not one. They would have all taken
Cruz
it.
would have wanted this. Rubio
Cruz,
would have wanted it
Rubio,
for Iowa.
Bush,
You'd want it for Iowa.
I
And then,
think-
of course, you're terrified of what she'll say in the next 2 weeks before Iowa. But I got to think she realizes she's been in obscurity for a bit. He just brought her back. He did her the favor. But at the same time, it serves his purposes in Iowa, especially given the amazing timing of the governor of Iowa coming out and saying, I'm not endorsing anybody, but I don't want you to vote for Ted Cruz. And that guy knows how to move caucus votes. It's almost ward boss. disparaging for me to say it that way, but he's got that kind of an organization, in Iowa. It's almost Chicago-like and whatnot, as far as the wards, the precincts, and all that.
Yeah.
That's a stunner. And as we keep talking about Donald Trump and whatnot, you lose that there's the other part of this race right now. Is there a race going on right now for the vice presidency? Traditionally, it's the number 2, or it's the one who's got the good resume. With Donald Trump, you don't know what he's going to do. Word has leaked about Scott Brown.
Yeah,
when you got a Kasich on the stage, who you could arguably say, I'm the Donald and I'm the bluster, he'll be the hard work guy. He'll be the former governor, the former Congress, the guy that did a congressional budget. Let's bring Kasich onto the stage, who's doing well, plodding along. Number 2 in New Hampshire right now. But all of a sudden, we're talking about Scott Brown.
Yeah.
And here's Sarah Palin around again. Gosh.
With the two of them together in New Hampshire last week, Scott introduces him and gives him that wonderful introduction, and then I got the quote right here.
Yeah.
He goes, Donald Trump, talking about Scott Brown, he goes, you know what? He's central casting. He goes, look at this guy. He's central casting, talking about the vice presidency. He goes, a great guy with a beautiful wife and a great family. It's also important. Yeah. But he's, throwing it out there.
And that from the Donald, who's not central casting in that regard, at least not the concept of traditional family Republican vows, third wife, jet-setting kind of guy, casino mogul and whatnot. But yeah, he's right about Brown. And you could say that, Kasich fits a dour version of that. Not quite as attractive, obviously, or cool as Scott Brown. But yeah, what's going on in the vice presidency? What's happening in that regard? Who's out there? For the bigger headache? For Hillary or for Bernie? What they've got to do if it's them that makes the decision. And forgive me for jumping around here so much too, but there's the other part of this right now too. This morning, as we're sitting here, Joe Scarborough, MSNBC, who's become amazing with what's going on, his right to Mika Brzezinski's left on Morning Joe. They've got a gigantic following in the morning now. It's become the place to go for everybody to come in and weigh in. The Mike Barnacles and all the really smart smart kids table, so to speak. And he leaks this morning. I was talking to Donald last week, and I'm sure he won't mind if I let this out, but he got into this whole concept of Trump. The conventional wisdom being that he would want to run against Bernie Sanders, or any Republican would run against Bernie, the extreme left. And Trump just laid it out. What are you, nuts? I want Hillary Clinton. That's where I beat her. But Bernie, he's tapping into this. We're tapping into the same Kool-Aid pitcher. Yeah. Trump said that,
Yeah.
Bang. So this one is amazing. This is chess on 1,000 boards at one time.
And what's funny with the Scott Brown announcement, with the chatter, the social media chatter, I mean, there were people on the Republican side just really freaking out because, Trump's not the conservative guy, right? I mean, and he's not. He's a moderate, I would say, because his views are very, traditional, maybe core Republican views. He's probably not that big on them, or behind them. And then you got Scott Brown, who the conservatives liked and then didn't like, but he resonated with a lot of people. And he brings in. He's always been. I'm that guy who goes to both sides of the aisle for you. And I mean, there was like little reverberations, like a little earthquake. You felt the tremors of those oblique moments. That if that happens, what do you do? I mean, now you're not controlling anything at that point in time. If you're the establishment, the K Street guys are the ones who got the biggest skin in the game with these two, right? But I just thought it was kind of, like you said, and sometimes you say, oh, he's just saying kind words about a guy. But when you throw it, and Trump knows what he's doing. As much as people say he's just off the top, and that stuff is calculated to a degree, And I know he probably just threw the little hand grenade in the Republican room and said, "Now what, guys? What if I pick him? What are you going to do to me now?" Because Brown was backed by the establishment.
Yeah.
So how do you? And I don't think it's going to be a Sarah Palin, but to your point, what's Sarah Palin going to say that's going to be more controversial than what Donald Trump has said?
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, but he knows that, right? I mean, he'll take her endorsement because she can go let off a bunch of firecrackers in the room too. But I don't think he's worried about that stuff. It's funny, and you talked about, he's not third marriage and all that stuff. Yeah. I think, especially in this world today, right, that's the stuff that, and I don't know if Bill Clinton's infidelities are going to be a harm to Hillary or not either. I mean, because I think people see that the same way. Now you're trying to distract from really what's important. Yeah. Bill Clinton fooled around. I think everybody knows that. I mean, that's whether you have the negatives or not, there's a whole different issue. We know Trump's on his third marriage, but he's got kids that are, working, and so it's hard to attack them and say, well, that, but that's not really the issue, is it? Whether or not he was married once or twice, because that's almost the norm now.
I was just going to say, doesn't that make him a little more like, who's that holy that they can walk that staunch,
and I don't, and I don't look at Bill and Hillary and saying, oh my God, he's fooled around on it, because I don't. That's not me to judge. I'm not perfect, and neither is But the reality is that I think what people are saying, that we don't want that. What I want to hear is what the guy's going to make America great again. And he doesn't have a plan on paper or whatever, but he's telling people, this is what I'm going to do. That's what I haven't heard from Hillary, is what am I going to do for the country? Other than I'm going to go take on Wall Street, which she can't take on Wall Street because she's in bed. I mean, again, politically.
That's so intriguing, because that's what a lot of us are looking at right now and saying, is the message on target? Is she tone deaf again? Are her advisors advising in the wrong way? So from New York Times to Wall Street Journal to a whole bunch of other players right now, that's what the rub is right now. Or what is this all about? Did they try to control the game too much? Did they misgauge Bernie Sanders? And also, it's all about the message. And what is that message? And is her message resonating at all? It seems his is, especially if you're looking at the numbers in New Hampshire right now. It's almost 2-1 right now in New Hampshire. If the WMUR CNN poll is on target, and certainly there's still time to play before all is said and done, and a million things can happen. But those numbers, that's not just a blip. That's not just he's the guy from next door from Vermont, Something's up. Something's going on.
Yeah. Here's the question I have for you two, because you're the consultant. You answer it second.
Sure. All right.
How do you get to be Hillary Clinton's position, front runner, raking in millions of dollars in donations, which God bless him, right? And be in this position? How does this happen? Not once. This is going to be the second time, right? I mean, you would think so. You cover this a lot more than. How's this happen?
Underestimating your competition. And maybe that in a combination of bad advice.
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, you think, oh, well, Bernie Sanders is too, he's just way too out there. He's not electable.
Right.
Okay, so perhaps he was engaged as a real threat. And as maybe she hasn't lived up to the expectations that some folks had for, Bernie's exceeded them. And he's gotten the spotlight. So she's doing what she's been doing. I think, in my opinion, it comes back to the establishment, non-establishment thing. And did she take for granted the front-runner status a little bit? It's quite possible.
Yeah. She's still got the organizational, institutional players for when she gets past Iowa and New Hampshire that should help her a lot. She's still got the bankroll, the money. But that's amazing, too. Take a look at what she spent in Iowa and New Hampshire. He's outspending her right now. Bernie Sanders, if anyone had told me that Bernie Sanders would be on TV, radio, and in print more than Hillary Clinton in Iowa, it's not possible.
Right.
It's just not the makeup of his team, of his guys. But look at who some of his folks are, too. These aren't, this isn't the Ben and Jerry's crowd, there are some players there. Tad Devine, a la John Kerry, Ted Kennedy. This guy knows how to mix it up. He's not just running Massachusetts now, he's running the whole gambit. And they've doubled down in Iowa and in New Hampshire. And they're picking up people. They're smart. They're hearing a message, maybe similar to Trump. And this went from being a niche, fringe campaign of a socialist to all of a sudden, this is the party. And maybe that's the other thing, too. Are the base changing? It's not the Democratic establishment to say maybe to the voter, to the base, and the activists. Maybe the activists within are saying, we're moving towards Bernie. We would have loved to move toward Liz Warren. But in the absence of Liz, watch Elizabeth Warren. Again, I go to Shannon Young, a brilliant, brilliant piece by her. That shadow of Elizabeth Warren on this campaign, what she does or doesn't do. Holy smokes. And she's got some juice everywhere right now. She is intriguing, because when you can be a liberal progressive, but when you say to your own president, hey, we campaigned on this, and I appreciate you helping me get elected or coming out for me in Massachusetts or whatever, but gosh golly gee whiz, let's go. That resonated. Republicans like that. Independents like that. Democrats. Remember her polling at the beginning of this whole thing. She was way ahead of Biden. It was Hillary and it was Elizabeth Warren. Those are the players. Those are the numbers in the early polls and whatnot. Maybe things are changing. Maybe the bases of these parties are moving what the parties are becoming. And maybe the silver hairs and the old players and whatnot that have been around forever in both parties, maybe the day's changing where they're not going to call the shots and it's going to be called from the bottom.
All right, so I'm going to pull this back. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to pull it back locally, right? So in Massachusetts, when I always say Massachusetts, to me is a microcosm of the country. We've had, Deval Patrick to Barack Obama, to Romney Care, to Obamacare, whatever. There seems to be a pattern almost. But does this help the Donald Trump campaign? Because I don't think all socialists are Democrats. Because I think there's a lot of libertarianism
Sure.
in
Yeah,
socialism.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
So does this help the Evan Falchuks of the world?
I don't know if it's Trump that helps them.
No, but just
Yeah.
I think because to me the parties are imploding.
Yeah.
Because the rhetoric from the parties is worse than
Yeah.
what we call the fringe
Yeah.
of the parties today.
Yeah.
I mean, does that help an independent in 4 years?
It's funny because we
or
were
2
just
years?
talking about it
Yeah.
a couple of minutes ago during the
Yeah.
fire drill here and whatnot, but I'll let you start on that one if you.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned Massachusetts, you bring it back there. It's interesting. When we're talking about this, is the base changing? Look at the last gubernatorial cycle here. Martha Coakley was the establishment candidate, and the Democrats weren't all that thrilled with her. She was their candidate,
Yep.
and I don't want to say she was forced down their throat, but that's, to be quite frank, that's kind of how it went down. And because of that, she didn't generate
Wow.
that level of excitement. And so yes, could the base be changing? I think it's quite possible.
I think so very much, especially when you look at Worcester County and what's happening there right now. I mean, they threw out a longtime senator, state senator, Senator Richard Moore, who was very in keeping with the values of Worcester County. He got beaten by a Republican who had been in the House one term, had been just a second term. Dick Moore wasn't just a long-standing player in the Democratic Senate. He was a Clinton official. He was a major player. He brought the bacon back. The guy was an icon. He was a player. He was a major player. You're right. He was summoned. And he was the Senate President pro tem. This guy had juice. You don't get knocked out by a freshman. It doesn't happen. And it happened. We're starting to see these things happen in Massachusetts because the base is standing up and saying, hey, you know what? Enough. I'm tired. Even Ann Goby, who won by less than 200 votes to replace another icon in central Massachusetts, a liberal progressive icon, to replace Steve Brewer, the chairman of Ways and Means, a Republican school committee fellow, and forgive me, I can't say his last name correctly, from Ware, Massachusetts. Not even the Republican establishment's candidate, going back to your piece.
Yep.
It wasn't Mass GOP, it wasn't the RSC that liked this guy. They liked somebody else, put their money and the time behind him. The other guy outworked, out-activated, and almost beat an icon, came 200 votes short. Wow. Yeah, there's something going on.
Yeah.
There's something happening. And for Evan Falchuk, can he tap into that? That's the question. Can he find the candidates
Right.
to tap into that?
That's,
He
I
seems
think,
to have
the
the
big
money.
thing.
He's had the victory, and as a victory on the Olympics piece, wow. Is Evan promoting that the right way to get out there
Yep.
and get the attention he needs for his candidates?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, as everything else happens, our primary's in March. And I don't have the date at the top of my head, but the worst thing you can do is go vote. That's the best thing you can do.
March 1st.
Wherever you are, whoever you
March
support,
4th, yeah.
go vote. I want to thank you guys for coming on, and we'll come on maybe right after the primary here in
Cool.
Massachusetts,
Yeah.
because it seems to me, I think this is a Donald Trump state for whatever is going on out there from what I'm seeing on the Republican side. So it'll be interesting to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you guys for coming on. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thank
It's the
you.
fastest hour in television.
Oh, wow.
And I want to say thank you guys for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of The Upside. Have a great day.
Very cool.
Thank you guys.